Hello, welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. As you can see, Lily is going to town on my Witcher pillow. We just got new spring haircuts. I got a new dress, which I love, and I'm just ready for warm weather. I don't know about you. Lily, what are you doing to The Witcher? When is The Witcher coming back on? I cannot wait for that show to start again. Anyway, what I was trying to do before Lily interrupted me was show that I have a new pillow in my library, and this is Regina's Haunted Library pillow with Regina Batilda, but Lily kind of got cut off in the prototype. So I'm going to have this redone, and God. And what I am doing for my third year booktube anniversary is coming up in June. I'm going to be giving away this pillow, but nicer, and a few other goodies to a couple lucky winners. So I feel like today is just a little bit of a chat. If you stick around, I have something different planned for the end of this video. That's why this video is so long. But I thought I would start with a little bit of a book chat. So lately I have been doing a lot of V.C. Andrews, not even reviews, but kind of discussions, because I've been on a V.C. Andrews kick, and I'm continuing that. I'm not stopping. I've just taken a little break because what I did was, as I was reading Ruby and really loving it, and it all takes place in Louisiana, in New Orleans, in the Bayou, which is one of my favorite places. At least, I'm not that worldly, but it's my favorite place in the United States. I said, oh, you know what? I'm reading all this stuff about Louisiana. It's given me a hankering for Anne Rice. So what I did was, maybe a year, 2 summers ago, I reread The Witching Hour because I always loved the Mayfair Witches series of Anne Rice more than the Vampire Chronicles, which I have not read all the Vampire Chronicles. I've only read the first 2 books. And I do intend to read Queen of the Damned. But I went ahead and reread Lasher. And I ended up giving this as a reread, a 2-star review. This book is just not very good. And it's over 500 pages long. And of course I had to finish it. I guess I read this book when it first came out in the 90s. And I was really into it then. Now, I do remember not liking this book as much as the first book. And I still did like the first book. This is actually a signed copy. It's signed by Anne Rice, but it's inscribed to someone named Barbara Sullivan. I found this in a thrift store. So I don't know who Barbara Sullivan is, but she obviously gave the book away. And I just found this book. It was like a car crash I could not look away from for most of it. But it's just not good in so many ways. So I'm not going to go off on all of the reasons why I didn't really enjoy it this time. I mean, there are some things about it. The 2 stars are for the things that I really loved. The -3 are for just the awful things in this book. I guess even when I read this in the late 90s, and I'm the last person to call a book problematic. In fact, I hate all of that. But the 13-year-old nymphette, Mona, seducing Michael, who's supposed to be like the hero, and he doesn't just, resist her temptation, but succumbs to it, even though there's a little bit of a supernatural element thrown in to help him fog his, resistance or whatever you want to call it. It still sets it up as being very, ick. There's a lot of ick in this book. That's one of them. The whole, and I guess maybe that was considered edgy then. I mean, there were a lot more edgy books, like Poppy C. Bright is very edgy. I mean, if you want to go back to the 90s, what was popular. But, and very Southern Gothic, and I loved it then too. And I'm sure I would still enjoy it now. But this one just really kind of was like, ew. It wouldn't have been so ew if the story had been better. It also has this very chthonic, I think that's the word, feeling of, which is very not sexy, where Lasher, this creature, and it goes into his whole history, which was actually one of the enjoyable parts of the book, is when he and Rowan, the character of Mayfield, the character from the first book, the protagonist, she gives birth to Lasher, this creature who then is like her child and her lover at the same time. So while he's having sex with her, he's breastfeeding. Like, all of that just, I don't know. I wasn't into it. I thought it was really gross. And yet I persevered and read. So I've read this book twice now. So, yeah. Will I read the next one in the series again? Probably yes. Just to see. I mean, that's what's weird about Anne Rice for me. It's not even love-hate. It's like I'm repulsed and attracted to it at the same time. Okay, well, I don't know how much of that you got because my mic battery went dead in the middle of my Anne Rice tirade. But anyway, I decided that I'm just going to read what makes me happy. And if you're around for that, that's great, because I like more, I don't know, my own kind of niche, I guess. I'm not following the what's popular on BookTube anymore. I've given up on that. And I'm just reading things like Dark Shadows. And I mean, after Lasher, I needed Nancy Drew. So I'm reading this one too, Mystery at Lilac Inn. Nancy Drew is probably, I think I learned, between Mad Magazine and Nancy Drew, that's how I learned to read as a kid. So, yeah. Oh, another thing, I've been reading a couple things that are a little bit more, I guess, nonfiction. One thing I picked up, a book that I bought probably 2 years ago, and I'm just picking up now, is, and I've never read anything by Neil Gaiman, I mean, he's a very popular author right now, but I think I bought this in a store somewhere, his nonfiction book about Norse mythology. It's very short, which makes me wonder. I guess there's not much, but I love Norse mythology. I did a video about my children's books where I talk about my Norse Gods and Giants books, which I love. I've always loved Norse mythology because of those books. So I'm looking forward to reading this. I just dug into, I think I just read the foreword. And I'm also reading, listening on audiobook to the book about the Guccis. I'm going to put this right here because I don't even remember who wrote it or what the full title is, but I know that Lady Gaga and Adam Driver are shooting a movie about this story. And it's all about the world of fashion, and it's very interesting. So I'm not just reading fiction. I'm reading a lot of different things. So I guess moving forward, going into my third year on BookTube, that is what you can expect from this channel, is just kind of my own thing. And if you like that, thanks for sticking around. And if this video looks super long, it's because I am attaching to the end of this video a podcast that I did, I think he just put it up a couple days ago, with my friend James Ippoliti. And he is a local artist. I've known him for many years now, and we've worked on some projects together, and he's a really great guy. He has a TikTok channel, and he's also on Instagram. I'll link all his pertinent links below, about creativity. Now, I've done a lot of different things in my life creatively. I've directed plays, I've written screenplays, I've directed some films, well, at least 2, and some other film projects, and have written books, and have written songs. I've done like a lot of stuff like that. I've designed costumes. That's actually my profession at the moment, although I'm laid off. But I've done a lot of different stuff. But one thing that has always been consistent was my commitment to creativity. So in our podcast, it's probably about 45 minutes long. He and I talk about that topic. And I'm hoping that we will go back and talk more, because I felt like it was something that I could certainly talk about for a long time. And we cover some different bases on the topic of creativity and how to become more creative. And he has a really great channel where he does these cool challenges, these sketches, like sketch this week or sketch that. It's very cool. So if you want to stick around and listen to the podcast on the topic of creativity, please do. I would love to hear your thoughts about that subject below if you'd like. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
The word inspiration is, to inspire is like to breathe into, right? This kind of idea that there is something outside of us. Do you think that creativity has some level of a spiritual thing to it? And that's why we're kind of talking about the muse. Back in the ancient Greeks, it was like these 9 goddesses or something. On your own creative stuff, do you have those moments where you're like, where did that come from? Because, a lot of people talk about maybe they created something and have no idea how they got that or got to that place. With you writing now, do you get in those places where you're sort of just caught up in this and it feels like there's something else working with you?
I know what you're talking about. I definitely have experienced that before. I think for me that has mostly come through with poetry and music. When I write songs, which I'm not, like I say, I'm not a musician because I'm not like you. I don't really play instrument. I bang out a few chords on a guitar, but sometimes I'll just be, and it usually happens when I'm in like a pretty heightened emotional state, even like a sad state. Like I feel like sadness to me is more connected to the muse than other emotional states. I remember reading Stephen King's book on writing, and I think you've talked about that. Yeah, I
have it right here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a really good book. And he's very, very disciplined and of course, very prolific. And he said, if you show up the same time every day, chances are your muse will too. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. I definitely believe in that. I try to write in the morning. That's my dog opening the door. I don't do it every single day, but I do it most days. And sometimes there's no divine inspiration. I would say most of the time there's no inspiration, but sometimes it usually happens when I'm driving. And if I'm feeling like sad, or I would use the word depressed, just melancholy, I think is a more romantic word for it. Suddenly just a song or like a lyric or a poem will just kind of come through me. And I try to write it down. Like I don't write songs or poems. It's not like a regular thing, but they have come through me. And when I do get that, I make sure I do write it down. I try to work out the chords on the guitar, very basic stuff. And then one of these days, I would really like to put all my songs together, all the songs that I've written, and maybe have some other people record them, because I have written in my lifetime probably an album's worth of songs, but I just not a musician, but those songs and poems kind of come through me. So those are the times when I really feel like the connection with the muse.
That's interesting you say that, because I've read things where there's some people believe in the creative world that the idea of this melancholy or the suffering artist or something to that effect can be toxic. Do you think, because some artists in the past, I forget who said it, but basically if you're content, you have a harder time creating. If your life is going well or things are just fine. Do you find do you feel that way about creativity, that if your life is just going around smoothly and everything's good, that it's harder to create because we pull from the dark areas? Or do you disagree with that?
Well, I disagree with that in that, I do like a regular schedule of writing. So I'm not feeling sad every day, thank God. It's work. It really is work. Like I'm working on a new story for one of my Wattpad stories, and I wake up and look at it and like, okay, I got to now write this next chapter. And, I sit down and sometimes I put a timer on. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words in 1 hour. And to me, that's work, but it's fun work, but it's work. The other thing that you're saying, I do think there's a toxic side of it. You can go into like this place where, I've got to be suffering.
Yes.
And I don't think that's healthy. And I wouldn't encourage that, but sometimes really getting down into some strong feelings where you find these pools of truth or whatever, that's where you're going to find a lot of the good stuff.
Right. I think you and I have both matured creatively where we understand that you can have a life where you're content, but still know how to reach those deep areas, those wells of, of emotion, and not have it become your life. Where I think a younger artist, and, I'm sure I was guilty of it in my youth, of just like, I'm so, depressed and I need to write. And if I'm not, if things got better, then I probably would have nothing to write about,
I mean, one place that I find so much inspiration from is just in nature and just getting out and walking. Like I go to Tyler Park and, I do like a hike, and that's not being depressed, that's being happy and healthy and being in tune. You can get so sad or depressed that you become incapacitated,
right.
And then you can't do anything.
I find that to be more true.
Yeah. So I'm not recommending, but I guess what I'm saying, it's not even depression. It's like, it's strong feeling, strong feelings and strong emotions, not suppressing them. You can tap into inspiration and art and let it flow through you and create something. Like in that way, art is therapy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And that would be a whole nother, I think, discussion, art and therapy. But since you've done a lot, not just writing books and songs and also the web series and things with film, do you feel like it's all sort of connected the same way, like the way you find inspiration, or is it different if you're going to be working on a film? Because you're working with actors and you have a lot more people involved than sitting there writing your book.
Well, I think that you have to. I'll give an example, like when I did The Weirdness, which is a very, and I have it on my YouTube channel. That was a very experimental. I was just kind of going with impulses in the writing process. When I was writing it, I was like, I don't know why this image is sticking with me, but I'm going to just use it. And it was great. It was I mean, I don't know, how the product is, but the process was really great. A great experience. But then when it gets down to the brass tacks of making it, that you have to be super organized. So you can't be feeling it on the set when you've got like a job to do. And, I think it's a process of being very disciplined and very logical. Like you have to be able to put it all together.
Where do you think you learned that? Because I think a lot of artists, and I see this a lot with all types of artists, is they just sit back and they say, I feel I can't be inspired, or I'm waiting for inspiration, or, nothing's coming to me. But as long as I've known you, you've been very disciplined in what you do. At what point, do you feel like that was a lesson you learned that, hey, and you brought it up several times, that it's work, and whether I feel inspired or not, I'm going to sit down and write, or I'm going to get this thing shot.
I have to say it really was a way of life for me growing up. That is how I think I survived a very traumatic childhood. I don't know. Like we always, I had a very crazy upbringing, but we were always creative. We had, one television with 2 channels on it, and we had a stereo with albums, and we would just all day long, like I'm thinking in the summer, we would be putting on plays, writing songs, drawing comics. We used to do this thing, and I actually would recommend this as a thing to do, as a good sketching thing. We played this game called draw-ins, and it was kind of like a play. This was in the 60s when we were little kids. It was kind of a play on the words, like love-in. It was a draw-in.
That's funny.
And we'd play the radio, and I think it was WFIL in Philadelphia.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. So, right, so we're listening to the radio, and for the duration of the song, which is like 4 minutes, let's say, you have to draw the song. So if it was like a monkey song, we would draw whatever was happening in the song, like a quick sketch. And I wish that we had like kept some of the stuff, because we would do these sketches. I mean, we would do that for hours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And we would do elaborate musicals, and so it's not something I learned to do as an adult. It's something that I always did, and I just never stopped doing it. And that's one thing I would like anybody who's looking to do art. Think back to when you were a kid, and I know you grew up in a very creative way.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to when you're a kid and just do that now. Play as an adult.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that, and I think that's I think it's Picasso, that it's the artist is the child who never grew up, or something to that effect. Yeah. So when it comes to the muse, do you think there is some kind of divine intervention, or do you think it's just our brains kind of trained and things spark inside the brain?
I don't know. It's a mystery. I guess that's part of the mystery. I think there is a divine kind of knowing that's not. It's not purely logical. I know that it's kind of a seeing, a feeling, a seeing something, a moment where something makes sense, or an expression.
See, this is where you and I will differ. And I'm not saying I know an answer here. I don't. That's why I'm exploring this. I don't know if you read the book Big Magic.
No.
I think you would like it. I never read Eat, Pray, Love, but it's the same author. She brings this up a lot about these type of things that would happen. And like you just said, it's a mystery. And I have, as a creative person, I've had those same mystical, weird experiences with creativity. And yet I don't believe in a divine thing. So to me, I'm curious as to what those things could, like she looks at it in an interesting way, as if ideas are sort of these living divine things that are trying to find somebody to bring them forth into the world. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've had an experience where you had an idea and you didn't follow through, and then later you found somebody, or you heard about somebody who did that same thing you were thinking of doing.
Yeah, it always makes me really mad.
Right.
That was my idea.
Yes. And so she explains it in a way where it's like, sometimes these ideas, if you don't do it, they get impatient and move on to someone else who will bring them forth into the world.
I'll tell you a quick story
Sure.
that happened to me recently. I'm open to these ideas of the mysticism, but I'm also extremely skeptical. And a couple months ago, I had this powerful synchronicity. I was walking to the post office, and suddenly I just thought of the Tao symbol. Mm-hmm. It just kind of hit me. And I mean, I've done a little reading about Taoism, but not that much. At the moment where that symbol filled my brain, I turned and I saw the symbol on the side, like a van, like painted on the side of a van. Like it was a logo or something. And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Right.
And then maybe a day later, I just had this impulse to search for jewelry. And I don't even wear jewelry. Like I wear one ring, my wedding ring. And I'm like, I want to buy a ring. I'm thinking I'm going to buy a ring, and something like with a moonstone. I don't know. I just started thinking of that. And so I went online and I was looking for rings on Etsy, and I didn't really find anything that I liked. And then the next day, Joe and I are walking down by the river, and I was telling him the story about seeing the Tao symbol. And just when I just finished the story, I saw this thing glittering on the ground, and I picked it up, and it was a ring with a Tao symbol and a moonstone. Yeah, I'm holding it right here.
Oh my God, that's so weird.
And I did actually go put it on Facebook to see if anyone lost the ring, but no one contacted me.
So that brings up something, again, that comes up a lot in creativity and in success and talking about life and things in general, is this idea of manifesting things, which I have a very hard time with. This manifested, that the book, The Secret, is all about that,
Right.
If you think hard enough on it. But your example is exactly sort of what they're talking about, right? There's this Dow symbol in your head.
I don't know if you can't force that kind of stuff though. I think that's the problem with messages like The Secret or these, or there's a lot of shysters out there that will tell you, oh, pay me this money and I'll help you find your twin flame or something, and I think you remember from Gemini Rising, the unicorn character. I've always been fascinated by the false guru character. And I love making fun of that character because I just think they're so full of it. So I'm very skeptical about anyone who's like, oh, well, you just have to do this. And, oh, by the way, make sure you sign up for all that. I hate that. That is, to me, against everything that what I've learned through these synchronicities or whatever you want to call them.
So why, and I think that the idea behind this sort of synchronicities and things like that, and creativity and ideas and inspiration, would that be a coincidence that happened, or is there something else? It's a strange occurrence, but could it just be coincidence?
It could be. But I think it's like if I find meaning in it, then it is a synchronicity. Like for me, I could have just kicked that ring out of the way and not even noticed it, but the fact that I did see it and pick it up and made it into something meaningful to me.
So that did become something meaningful to you?
It actually did, because I have been kind of on a spiritual path this past year with COVID, kind of losing my job for the year and everything. It's kind of was a really good opportunity to get in touch with some of this stuff. So I have, not that I've become like a Buddhist or anything, but I have been, open to the flow. Like, I think that that's what the message was. And I know, Tao is all about the flow, and it's being in the flow and going with the flow and not forcing things. And I think that is also good when you're approaching art.
Yeah. There is a book called Flow.
I have read that book, and it's very good.
And I can't pronounce the author's name.
No, me neither. But it's really good. And I read that a long time ago, but I'd like to read that again.
Yes. And the idea, and if you're a creative person, you have experienced flow. You absolutely have lost time and been sitting. It's an amazing experience to be in it that deep, and I think, again, that is a therapeutic thing when flow hits, that it's
absolutely
it's such a high,
And that's why I think that this is probably a topic for a different time, and I hope we'll do this again. But like being like a blocked creative or blocked artist is a real thing, and opening yourself up and freeing that block, and I think there's a lot of self-imposed tension and maybe societal things that we absorb and family things that we absorb, that you need to just get away from that. Like if you go, or I'll speak from my experience. Like if I start to write something thinking, is this book going to sell? I've killed it.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about. Like,
absolutely.
You cannot, or if you're drawing and you're thinking, oh, this sucks, or this is people are going to not.
I've talked about this week actually, of people, don't judge your self-worth on the end product, but judge that you're doing the work, and that's all that matters. Like get involved with that, because you're right. And I think you understand as well that if you are open to it, there's not enough time to get the ideas you have in your head out. Right. And it's the minute you start imposing those things, like, oh, is anybody going to like this, or even the fear of it being good, any kind of block, and mostly it's always fear.
Yes.
That will stop whatever this is, whatever that flow is. It will absolutely get blocked. And I find, I guess this year for me, I've been open. So I don't know, like, I don't feel like I'm blocked. I don't ever feel like.
That's awesome.
Not this year. I mean, I've been in that place, but I think this year has just been just different. And I think being home and working from home and sort of not having the distractions of the world, maybe that helped. I don't know.
Well, I think that the message that you're getting out on these short videos is great. I mean, I did a couple of those sketches that you suggested. I love doing that stuff. In fact, it reminded me of doing draw-ins. It's like, draw Paul McCartney. I never would have sat down and tried to draw Paul McCartney, and it was awesome.
Well, that's what I'm finding. And you know what's amazing to me? I'll tell you, one of the greatest things is somebody who said they have got back into their creative side of them, because of these challenges. Mm-hmm. And I got to figure out something. They're getting, this week is Danny DeVito, and it's so popular that I'm like not having enough time to
That's
do
awesome.
anything. But it's very cool. And it helps people get out of that idea of what do I draw next or what do I create next, It
brings the fun. It should be fun.
Yes.
I think that's what we lose when we start to, and I think that's what being blocked is you start to take it too seriously, and and it's like, I can't, it sucks, I can't do this. It's like, no, draw Danny DeVito. And it just, I took an art class because I like to draw as well. And this was at U of Arts, and I remember I hadn't drawn for a very long time, and I was being kind of uptight about it. And I remember the teacher said something that was so wise to me, or he said it to the class, and it was like a brilliant, revelation. He's like, don't try to draw a pretty picture, just try to figure it out with your pencil. Yeah. And I was like, wow.
It's so much fun. It's so much more fun trying to figure it out with your pencil. Like once you make that little click in your head about figuring out it, because we're so programmed to, like, if you draw an apple, you draw the classic shape of an apple. But when you actually look at an apple, it doesn't look anything like that. And you got to kind of do that. You got to unsee everything in the world. And then when you start looking at it fresh again, it's beautiful. It's because you're seeing everything.
Yes.
A whole new way. But it takes time.
It does take time. And it also takes getting rid of that, learning how to drop the critical voice that's judging everything you're doing.
I will say, though, and you brought this up earlier about the internet, I think it's harmed us in a lot of ways. There's every technology has pros and cons. But I have noticed as well that everybody compares themselves. And I'm not talking about, obviously we all do this about, oh, look how happy that family is. And then you see them on some kind of true crime story where the guy kills his whole family. Right. But you see how beautiful other people are. They all look happy. I've noticed that same thing is with art, with people who they're seeing other people's artwork and they immediately compare themselves and get down on themselves. Mm. And that's hard to tell people, hey, look, you're on a different journey here, and you can't, whoever that is you're looking at probably has been doing this for 15 years more than you,
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be someone who's better at doing what, I mean, if you're going to judge it on like, well, this drawing is much more like, looks exactly like a photo of Paul McCartney or something, but you could do a really quick sketch and it could be genius, it's just.
Again, I think people understand that the longer they're around it, art, I mean. Yeah. People go to the MoMA and some people get angry because they see some of this stuff and they don't understand it. And if you don't understand the art movements and why something became what it became, then of course, like, Mondrian's going to look strange to you and say, oh, I could do that on my computer.
I know. I did. I went to Joe and I had a friend of mine. We went to MoMA and she was flipping out over like the Mark Rothko paintings. And she's like, this is such a ripoff. And she was getting like really upset.
Yeah. I see.
And we were like, geez.
Yeah, you can hear the conversations when you're there and you see like a Jackson Pollock and people are like, or even Andy Warhol. And it's like, look, I don't like, that's the thing I'm trying to, when I talk about it, and this is the same with music and it's the same with, writing. It's like, we don't need everybody to be doing the same thing. And not everybody's voice is going to be the same. And
right. How boring would that be?
Absolutely.
And it's not like there's a goal that I mean, it depends on what your goals are. Like now, I mean, that's why I was saying, just to bring it back from the beginning about the muse, I think the muse really comes is where I feel the most free, is the thing I'm the least invested. And that with music, I'm just like in a sandbox when it comes to music. I'm like so free with it that I'm open to all kinds of possibilities, because I have no preconceived ideas about me as a musician, because I don't consider myself a musician. So when I create a song, there's something just very childlike about that process, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I mean, it might suck, but like for me, it's like, wow, I can make a song even though I have no idea what I'm doing. There's something just really wonderful about that now. But but to work on your technique, like I've definitely put more work into like the writing. So I've worked on that technique. That's more like craft, but it's all, I don't know, it's all related, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
but I think that like to not lose the fun aspect, it has to be fun.
And, to go back saying I'm not a musician. So that, again, that goes to where we have these labels where it's like, that's not necessarily true. I mean, if we go back before instruments and somebody was just doing like the vocal chants without that, I mean, that's a song, right?
That's true. I shouldn't put that label on myself, because I've written songs. So obviously I am musical. It's just not something I've developed like you have, where you really play musical instruments really well. But
yeah, I mean, that's the difference. I often say I look at it in a different way as a musician. I think there are songwriters and I think there are musicians, and I think they can be both, but they don't have to be.
Yeah, that's true.
I know people who can play an instrument really well, but they don't really write songs, and they probably don't care to, they just like, hey, this is what we're playing. Okay, let me play that,
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, not everyone has to be able to write a song.
And then there are songwriters who might know a few chords, and they go into the studio and then they get all these other people to sit down with them and,
Yes. And that gets into and it's probably another topic, but the collaborative process is also something that can create, I think that can bring in a muse. Like if it's really clicking. And that's a beautiful experience when you've got a group of people. It can also be really toxic.
Yes.
But and I know you've been in bands and stuff, so you know all about that. When that is in flow, there's nothing like that.
Yes.
It's rare. But it can be
I think amazing. that like music with a band, or even like you've done filmmaking as a collaborative thing, that also, if it's flowing well, it's great. But then you don't know. I mean, if you look at Jaws, it's always got to come up, I guess, somehow.
Yeah. But all roads lead back to Jaws.
But if you look at Spielberg's experience on there, it was an awful, awful experience. But when you connect the dots later on of why that movie works, is because of all those awful experiences, right? And there was a lot of weird things that kind of, because they were on the island so long working, was how they were able to get the writing and the characters. And because the shark didn't work, we didn't have that fake looking shark. It would have not probably worked had things not gone that way. And so
maybe Spielberg was like in flow and like determined to make it work no matter what. That
is yes. I mean, he thought he was going to lose and never work again.
Well, so the stakes were really high, so he had to do it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because, when you hear his interviews, he says, I think about two things, courage and stupidity, right? and that's sort of his thing. You're right. He had the courage to just do whatever he had to do to get it done, but he also felt I was so stupid I didn't know what I should or shouldn't be doing,
But, that's probably when someone does their best work in a way, when they're really on the tightrope.
Yeah, I agree. I always suggested that he should take these directors who now can get whatever they want and give them like a $200,000 budget.
Yeah.
And see what they come up with, because I think that would be amazing to see what Spielberg would do if he's limited again.
Constraints are wonderful.
Yep.
And that is another topic for creativity and I think that's why your challenges are great, because it's like, draw this the constraint is you got to draw Danny DeVito,
Right.
and it's like, you got to find a picture of him or think about what he looks like. That's a constraint. If everything is open.
Well, yeah, I
much.
had.
But I think that what's fun about doing the challenge is that it's like a sketch. You have to, this is another thing, like the art teacher that said, try to figure it out. Another one is this, God, now I can't remember his name. There's like a YouTube writer. He's an older guy who's been a Pulp Fiction writer for, 40 years and has written 1,000 books. And he was saying, when you, and I think this can apply to other art as well. It's like when you sit down to write, don't think, I've got to write this. Think about it. It's practice.
Oh, yeah.
It's practice. And I think people sometimes don't see art that way, and they should. It's like when you have to master like an instrument, like if you're learning how to play piano, you have to practice. Writing is the same way, or drawing, it's practice. So it's taking the pressure off. Like, I don't have to create this great, amazing novel with all this pressure. It's just like, I'm going to sit down and write, and I'm going to do my best.
Yeah, I think going back to the child's mind, I think that as adults trying to get started with creativity, it's difficult because they don't have that child's mind anymore, and they're too impatient with the idea of practice.
Yes.
And if you were to actually look at artists, and that could be any art form, doing the behind the scenes, it's not a very pretty thing. We always want to romanticize the writer or the, musician. Mm-hmm. But like, I look back when I was a kid, I was doing scales, and I was playing scales. I was practicing just moving my fingers a certain way. Writers write really bad first drafts that nobody sees,
Mm-hmm.
Dancers, I mean, a lot of that I'm sure is stretching, like,
yes. Repetitive motions and training the body.
And so we see these final results. And when we're as adults and you get into creativity and you're like, I want to do this, and it doesn't come out, you're right. If you got to look at it, this is a journey you're on, you're not just going to, you're always going to be able to get better. There's always going to be someone better than you. And it's just, I think it came back again to fun. If you're not having fun, why are you doing it?
That's true. Like, none of us could probably paint like Leonardo da Vinci or whatever, but it's, if you expect to, at your first time at bat, like this writer said, you don't, someone who just barely knows how to play the piano is not going to give a concert at Carnegie Hall. It's just not going to happen. So take the pressure off yourself and be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to practice this every day. I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to write for an hour. I'm going to be in the zone. I'm not going to be distracted. And you feel good about yourself, or sketch for an hour, or play guitar for an hour, or whatever it is.
Why do you think it seems to be creativity is the only career, I'll use the word career, that people expect that? You don't, like, if you're a lawyer, you expect, or a doctor, you expect you're going to do put in whatever practice you have to put in before you ever become the head of some, wing in a doctor's or a hospital. But in creativity, people don't seem to think that it should be. Well, they also believe it's this natural ability. I mean, I think
yes, I know that's terrible. Well, I think it gets back to the inspiration. It's like, it just comes over you and you're just going to be a genius. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. In fact, speaking of Leonardo da Vinci, he, if you look at his sketchbooks, which are fascinating, you see him trying to figure this stuff out and, making mistakes, if you want to call them that. It's not, or Michelangelo, when he wrote sonnets, he didn't just paint, and he wrote a sonnet about the pain of laying on a scaffold on his back and, methodically painting over, the section of the Sistine Chapel or whatever. It's like, it's work.
Yeah.
You don't just magically become this. And it is, I do believe in talent.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another topic is talent and I would also go into it saying genetically talented. I think I definitely believe it can be passed on, but only, I would say, the desire and the, I don't know if you have a head start. I'm not sure. There's definitely something, but it might be that you have something in you that, because it really comes down to working at it, though. Even if you have the talent.
Well, I mean, I thought it was interesting, James, that your dad was an artist. And I thought that sketch you did of him as, painting was really good.
Yeah. I agree. My grandfather was a musician, but I don't, I know what I was like when I first played music. Right. And I mean, I've sketched a lot in my life. I don't again, that to me is sort of how you were talking about music. Art to me is fun for me. And I like doing it. And I like learning and trying different things. But did I have a advantage? No, I whatever I'm doing now, I had to work at. I had the same struggles, I think, that other people have had.
Yeah. I guess I'm not saying that you're born with it, but it's I think I think that you're born with, maybe talent is more like an interest. And if
that's what I was trying to say.
If you're in an environment where it's encouraged, then if you sit down with your kid and draw, and, it's, for us growing up, it was a way of, it wasn't, it was just something we did, then you do that, it's something that you do. And the sooner you can do it, I think the better. It's creating that zone of creativity.
Yeah, I think
where someone's safe to be creative.
I don't think it's a mistake that Stephen King and his wife have kids that write as well. No. She's a writer. King's a writer. Joe Hill's a writer. Owen King's a writer. And I personally like Joe Hill's work better than his dad's. I've
only read one Joe Hill book, which I thought was very good.
Was that the Heart-Shaped Box?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
But I would definitely read more. Yeah, I think that the environment, I think having a parent that does it gives you this feeling well, I can do this too.
Right. I remember as a parent, I remember someone saying something that stuck with me was, if you want your kids to do something, let them see you do it. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, if you could take your kid to guitar lessons and all you want, and they probably won't care. But if you want them to play guitar because you play guitar, they just need to see you doing it, and they'll probably have the interest in doing it.
Right. Absolutely.
And
absolutely. And my grandfather was a musician too. My Irish grandfather played fiddle.
Yeah.
It's a sort of, I think it's also I don't know, a family thing. It's a way of processing emotions.
Well, I believe everybody's born creative. I just do believe that. So everybody has the ability to be creative. I don't think
everyone has an ability to be creative.
Right. And I think you're right. If you're in an environment that encourages it and supports it, it's going to appear as if it's, oh my God, well, his dad was an artist. So, well, yeah, but you grew up around that, and we all have the ability to it. But if you're in an environment that's not encouraging or frowns on it and says, oh, you got to get a real job, that's going to be hard for you.
That is another thing, and maybe that's a separate topic, is that message of that negativity you get from creating art where, oh, well, that's, this, I think that's why people drop it when they become adults, because there's a lot of shame attached to it.
Yes.
Well, this isn't getting you a job. How are you going to make a living doing this? And it's geez, I'm just drawing. I'm playing the guitar.
Right. And there's that starving artist. I mean, where does that come, and it's, I had actually posted something this week too, saying back in ancient Greece, being an artist was a very important thing, and now you have to kind of explain why art is important. And
yeah, and when someone decides, to major in art or theater like I did, it's like, oh God, how are you going to make a living doing that?
Right. Might as well just throw your life away.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy. That's like a heavy thing to put on people.
Huge. Yeah.
It's huge, and it's discouraging.
And you know what's even more painful is, and you will understand this as well. If you are that kind of person, it's not something you can turn off.
I agree with you. In fact, I remember you and I had this conversation many years ago. And I remember I think you were coming from a place of frustration. So you said, I wish I didn't have this desire. Do you remember that conversation?
Absolutely. I always say this. I wish I had the desire to be a garbage man. I just wish that was my desire. I'd be happy and content. And although now I think I'm not as frustrated as I was then, but, and I think I understand better. And I wish I think growing up, the things that I struggle with mentally were never acknowledged as far as even in the world, not just my family or anything like that. But if you had something like ADHD or depression or, anxiety, that stuff wasn't diagnosed. It was just like, and so you live with this, and then you're not able to, function properly in the world. And, you got this creative urges, and it's just a big mess. And I think, it took me a while to get it together, but.
Yes. And, and I know so many creative people, like, and I know we're all part of this kind of creative community. It's a loose community, but we're definitely connected. And, one thing that I've always tried is encourage people to be creative, and I love what you're doing, because you're encouraging people to be creative, because that message you get, either if it's from your family or from society, or you internalize it when you feel like a loser because you're artistic. I've seen that play out in my own life. I've seen that play out in people I know, their lives. I hope you wouldn't mind me sharing this story real quick, but my friend Greg McGarvey, and you know him.
Yeah, he's a very talented musician. Yep. Yeah,
and visual artist. One of the most creative people I know, and I've known him since he was in high school, when he was, he was in one of my classes. But I've always encouraged his creativity, and he has he's allowed himself to live a creative life, and I remember when he did an album that he worked on it for a long time, and it just came out, maybe 6 months ago. It's called Count the Colors. He had a girlfriend named Marcella who died of cancer. And so it's a tribute to her. And it's like songs that are all about, her and the relationship and different things that he was going through and they were going through together. And it's really beautiful. And I will link it below when I post this on my channel. But it's great. But I remember seeing him. We met for coffee. This was all during COVID, so I hadn't seen him for a long time. We were like us, socially distancing at the coffee shop. And he just had that. And I could relate to it so much. And I know you probably have seen me in my, having my artist temper tantrum or whatever. But he was just going through that emptiness you feel when you create something, especially when it's like a big project, like a film, or for him, it was an album, and you put it out there and you get crickets back, and I just kind of sat with him with that, and I knew exactly what he was going through. And it's not like that people didn't love it, but it's like, you don't get a lot of love back. That's a big part of the creative process, and you put it out there, you put a book out and you think, hey, this is pretty good. And no one buys it. No one reviews it. And it hurts. It really, really hurts. And it's a very, you need courage to create. You really do, especially if you're going to put a product out that is like your raw emotions, which I know with Greg it was. And it was his record is beautifully produced. And And I know that he has his fans, so, you know, people do appreciate it, but it's like, we don't live in a society where that kind of work is celebrated. And I think that's really, really sad.
That's absolutely true. We don't live in that society. I don't know if that will ever change. Is we need to separate ourselves from that expectation because we have no control over that part of it. And I mean, we can do our best to market it and put it out there and keep doing it and keep marketing it. But we can't have our self-worth be reflected based on how people respond to it. You know,
I agree. And you know what, what helps with that is you do develop a thick skin by just putting it out there. And then afterwards you don't care anymore. It's like, I'm just going to put it out there.
I honestly think the answer to that is to work on something next.
Yes.
Is to just move on to the next thing. It's out there, you know, you do your promotion or whatever, but that's out there. And the nice thing is compared to years ago, it's there. And you don't know if maybe a year from now somebody notices it.
Yep.
You know, and that's the beauty of kind of the internet now. You know, I can put something out there and someone may discover it.
I mean, I don't know what I told Greg, but I think I did kind of tell him that just, you know, just keep, and he knows that, like, he got over it, like he recovered, but it's just that rawness that you feel.
Well, yeah, you're putting yourself out. You're basically opening up a vein, you know,
yes.
and people are just like walking over the blood on the street and just walking past you as you're bleeding on the ground.
You know, there's a callousness, but you get stronger. And I mean, I know some very professional artists who like put work in, you know, galleries in New York and they go through it. You know, I think everybody goes. I'm sure Steven Spielberg goes through it. Like it doesn't matter how successful you are. I think there is that feeling of, you know, hey, I'm putting myself out there. I'm opening myself up. Why doesn't anyone care? You know, that is a real thing.
Yep. I think that's another reason why I want to continue like on these little blurbs is because I think if it's always been that, but I think it's actually, I see a lot of it now, a lot of it of people almost being like quickly heading that way. Like it's not like
quickly heading people, what way? Like feeling discouraged.
Yeah. Like it's like, boy, and you know, I can see it. I mean, on TikTok, you will have somebody who has a song and all of a sudden that song becomes viral on there. And these people, you know, and you got to look at somebody else. And everybody says that somebody's just dancing on TikTok and they got 5 million views. And I've spent 70 hours on this drawing and nobody cares. And this is like a constant thing that people keep talking about. And
like I'll put a link to something a book that I've written or a film that I've made or whatever on Facebook, let's say, and I'll get crickets. And then I post a picture of my dog. You know?
Well, come on. You can't compare yourself to Lily. Come on.
I know. I do have a great dog. But, you know, and I think that in the early days of, like, let's say Facebook, that stuff would have been, when I was like doing Gemini Rising, I definitely, you have to go through that period, I think, of taking that stuff personally in a way to get to the point where you can just kind of laugh it off.
Yeah.
And that's part of doing the work.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you know, you've heard this even before the internet, how a lot of creators just said, I don't read the reviews. You know, you just go and you do your thing and it's out there and for better or worse. And then you move on and work on your next thing.
That's another thing. I mean, I know as a writer, like your first really bad 1-star review, which I have gotten, where, you know, someone writes like a huge paragraph, you know, or several like an essay telling you how much your book sucks. That is trial by fire. You know, I think you have to go through that. And now, I mean, it used to really, it would bum me out and ruin my day or my week or whatever. And I really, not that I don't check them every once in a while, but it's nice to get to that point where you don't really care.
Well, you know, what's interesting as well, and I know I think this way, is I can have 600 positive reviews, right? And I'll say, they don't know what they're talking about. And then you get this one that is a horrible review, and you'll be like, well, oh my God.
They see right through me.
Right? Like, why do we put any weight on that? But all the positive reviews, we don't put that much weight on. We're not like, you know. And
well, that's a really good question. I think that's a universal thing, though.
Yeah, I do too. But I don't think, I think, if you read some of these things, they just say, look, you can't put any weight on either of them, because if you go too far one way, you're going to have a big head. And if you go the other way, you're going to be depressed all the time, so you just don't even bother with them. You can say, oh, that's nice. I'm glad somebody says something,
Yeah, that's why I like a site like Wattpad, because, and I'm very active on that. It's not so much you get reviews, but you get, like, if someone really loves your story, a lot of times they'll let you know. And that's a really nice thing. And you can like write back to them and you can talk to them. And that's like, have that connection with someone who got what you were saying and actually took the time to read it, and they got a lot out of it and they let you know. That's really beautiful. And that's what's great about the internet. And that particular website, that platform is very positive.
Yeah. And, I think also, coming from a place, being older, where we had a life before the internet.
Mm-hmm. Thank God.
Yeah. But I also know how difficult it was for distribution prior to that. And for you to have an audience, that was not, forget about it back.
The gatekeepers were.
Everything. I have songs I put up, and I don't care. I record a song, I put it up like on streaming services. It's there. Somebody listens to it. That's like, wow. I mean, I have like, if 100 people listen to it, I'm like, that's 100 more than would have ever heard it, back in 1987 or something, I think that's the beauty of where we are.
Oh, I do too. I think it's a very positive thing. I think it's created in a lot of ways an artistic awake. It's a renaissance of creativity. That's why it should be celebrated. And even if you're not making money, which is another separate thing. It's like get your work out there, get your art out there, and like, not that I'm saying that writers shouldn't be paid. And this is maybe another topic too, because I know people have strong feelings about that. And I would like to get paid for my books too, but it's like it has to have value for someone to be willing to pay for it, And
well, that's a whole
other topic
that I have heard every angle of this.
No, yeah, there are a lot of angles, and I have some different opinions about it. I don't have one set idea about that.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult. A lot of artists on TikTok argue about this too, about, some will get angry if you charge too little. Others will get angry if you charge too much, it's and especially if you're saying, oh, I'm going to give it away for free. And, then what are you doing? You're right. I think there's some things in there. I think as long as you have a strategy of why you're doing what you're doing, it's okay. I know. Because it always makes sense why you would give something away for free, or why you would charge less. To kind of that gateway drug type thing,
Yeah. I mean, I know some artists, some people who make a living as artists, and they get very angry and express themselves, on Facebook, let's say, that, I work really hard to make art and these people are giving it away for free. I think it's up to the artist. If you want to, put it on like Wattpad, that's a free site, do it. It doesn't, no one can tell you that you can't give your work away. I mean, my older sister's a very good painter, and she said she would never charge for her painting. For her, it's like a spiritual thing, and it's an expressive thing, and she'll give them away,
Yeah.
And that's her choice. It doesn't mean that someone else, you can say, well, it drives the price down. It's like, I don't know. It's a different kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, because it's who you are and what you value yourself as an artist. And if you feel like you're right, like it's a spiritual thing and I've done this and I'm paying, because I would even argue that on Wattpad, and I have been thinking a lot about this, and there's a Black Mirror episode about it, that the followers and the likes is a type of currency now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, if you get enough followers and enough likes, that's a currency that you can then use to get to another plateau. So
yeah, it's also like a trust, like one thing, I have a YouTube channel and I would never, even though I'm eligible, I would never run ads on my videos just because I don't want to. I don't want the people who watch my videos to have to sit through the ad, because a lot of times I won't watch videos that run ads. And that doesn't mean that I don't value my work that I put on YouTube, but I don't expect to get paid. But some of those people that watch my YouTube channels will buy my books because they like me, or they're curious or whatever. Yeah. So for me, that is a purely fun thing.
Yeah, I just got something in the mail today, and I got to do
selling stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like every angle I'm like making money,
Right. Yeah, I got something in the mail today from an artist who's like, thank you for your support. And it was like these 3 different little art things that was drawn.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought it was really cool. And I'm like,
like an actual piece of mail?
Yeah. Yeah. In the mail.
Awesome.
I know. So yeah, I mean, there's those things that I really value that,
well, yeah. And the community, the horror community that I'm part of, I've had people send me books. I've sent them things like, this lovely girl, Merce from Harpies in the Trees, the girl in Berlin, sent me a bookmark of my Batilda character. So I had those printed. Great. Yeah. It's a great creative community. And I don't know if, not saying that artists shouldn't get paid, but that's a different topic. And it's also kind of a different level of maybe that what we're talking about,
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, the creativity thing and, I'm sure at some point that there's a couple of things I am trying to, I wouldn't say avoid, but I think there's people who talk better about it than I would as far as the business side of the arts, and I'm not there to discuss that, No,
I don't. I'm no expert at that either. I mean, I have made money selling books. Like the anthology that I put together is sold really well, but that's all going to charity. So, it's not going into my pocket, but that taught me about kind of creating a product that was easy to market because of the way it was a collaborative project. So if, all the authors who were part of that anthology combined, we probably had 100,000 followers on YouTube.
Right.
So it's spread more and people are interested in this writer. Maybe they're not interested in everybody in the anthology, but they like this guy and they like this girl or whatever. And that taught me a lot more about marketing, Yeah,
that reminds me of back in, early 90s, probably late 80s, early 90s. There was the Battle of the Bands in Levittown. They had what was it called? It was the Dugout. It was called the Dugout.
I remember that place.
Yeah, right up past 5 Points. And what they would do is they'd have like 5 bands play because they knew, and it would be like a Tuesday night or something like that. And we all had to have these little cards that we gave to our friends. So when they came at the door, they would hand the card of the band. Win because you were good. You won by the most amount of people you brought to the thing.
Right.
And it was definitely an amazing marketing thing because they filled the place every single time because everybody was trying to bring as many friends as they could. And I definitely think, and I had talked about this. I think I'm hoping we can end with this, but I am hoping because I feel like there was community before the internet in the art community. I remember just being in bands, but it wasn't just musicians we hung out with. It was, there were writers, there were artists. We all hung out. And then the internet came and it felt like everybody felt like, oh, I got my own like 15 minutes of fame channel and I'm going to focus on that and not worry about everybody. And I feel like I'm hoping there's a turn we are at that people are realizing that we need community.
Well, we definitely do need community. And I think, I mean, I feel part of a community online with just the horror stuff. And then also locally, I mean, hopefully we'll get this going for next summer, the salon that we did every year in the film, the music scene here and doing the films and stuff like and I know we're all part of this like Bucks County, Philadelphia kind of art community. The actual community is really important.
Yeah.
I supporting each other's, like my art friends up in New York, Ken and Alexis, they would always be going to their friends' opening. Theater people I know would always be going to their friends' plays. And it was just something you did. And I think that's really important to keep that going. And I think with the internet, it's like, oh, well, come and see what I'm doing. It needs to be a lot more.
Yeah. And I think maybe COVID has caused so many people to sort of reach out online as opposed to what we never did before, because before, you're right, come and see what I'm doing. But now we're all kind of like missing everybody, and maybe has forced people to realize I need to go and, support other people because I'm by myself and this sucks, But,
yeah. I mean,
I'm hoping.
Well, when I don't know if you remember, I think you do. When I went for a year, I did those film screenings at my studio every Friday night.
Yep.
I mean, I did it as a social experiment. I pretty much did it. I rarely did I miss a Friday, and I did it, it was a lot of hard work. And what I learned from that, though, was a little discouraging, because people would show up for their film, which they watched a million times, with their friends, and then they would leave when the next film would start.
Yeah.
And it used to really piss me off, because I was like, hey, watch, it's not just about you.
Well, that happened as a musician as well. You would go and play, and you had it, especially if you opened.
Yes.
No one would come and see the opening act, and you'd be like, they're all here for the other band. And it's like, you have like your friends, and either if you're not the main show, right? It's like, you would hope, hey, because they would always, if you're after the main act, they'd be like, hey, stay around for them, and nobody stays around. Or you're there before, nobody shows up until the other band goes on.
And you might be missing someone really great by,
Yeah, I don't know if it's I felt like New York was better at it than Philly. I mean, I honestly felt like New York's bars, people went to experience new stuff, versus Philly, no one comes out. It's a sports town. If you're not watching the Eagles, then you're not,
Yeah, because I'm sure like a band like Heart probably opened for the Who or something, I don't know if that's true, but
Heart opened up for Santana.
Oh, hey, there you go.
There's way back in the day, it was on Channel 12 PBS. It's an hour long, and it was a Heart Santana concert for the Americas.
Wow.
And
I have to look that up.
The Heart was amazing, unbelievable. Well, they always are, but they were really young, and they were opening up for Santana. And now this was not, I wasn't like watching it live. It was like a pre-recorded. I don't know when it was, but I remember watching on Channel 12, and I was like, how is this an hour long? Like, Heart played. So what happened was Heart played for a half hour to open up, and Santana got on and played for a half hour, and then a thunderstorm came through, and they had to stop.
Oh, wow.
But it was a great thing, because you're like, they're playing.
YouTube.
Yeah, you got to watch them. Yeah, check it out. It's Concert for the Americas, Heart and Santana, and it's just like watching Santana play with all their bongos and stuff, and then the storm rolling in and just thunder and lightning. And you're like, what? It's like,
wow.
Because how it gets sort of this trippy sort of
trance.
Yes, and then the storm. It was just like, I never forgot watching that on PBS. But yeah, Heart was really good for that. So, all right. Well, that has been a lot of fun.
That has been great. It's been a great combo. I hope that we do this again with a different topic, because it seems like we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about.